Welcome to Morally Offensive, the podcast that, when it's good, it's very good, but when it's bad, it's better. I'm Bill.
I'm Jess.
And today we are talking about one of the key films that pushed Will Hayes, Joseph Breen, and the Catholic Censors over the edge and helped launch the career of a young Cary Grant.
This is a podcast about the films condemned or considered morally offensive by the Catholic Church.
We both grew up Catholic, and now we're not for reasons, but we're still fascinated by the religion that raised us. The films we cover are selected from the official film review lists of the Legion of Decency, rest in peace, and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. I'm a motion graphics designer, editor, and DJ.
And I am an instructor and have a PhD in film and television studies.
And together we are on a journey to watch every film condemned or considered morally offensive. Jess, thank you for coming on. This is your first time co-hosting with us. You've been a guest before, but with Cisco needing a little bit of a break, I thought you'd be a great person to reach out to, along with our two other extra co-hosts, to kind of rotate. And it's going to bring an interesting perspective to the podcast, I think.
Thank you for having me. Excited to give this role a shot here. Sorry, Cisco, if I outshine you here, but it just happens.
I think he's happy to get more sleep, honestly. So,
I mean, technically, I taught him. So he is, even if he's better than me, he's a product of me, right? So
you made him.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if I want to take that responsibility, but
yeah, thousands don't. And today we also have a guest with us, which I'm trying to have be a more regular occurrence since I'm kind of handling the edits, which means it's just me torturing myself, not someone else. And I'm really good at torturing myself. We have with us a guest from a film podcast I love called Shea Cinema. Sara, Shea, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've been listening to your show since the very beginning and fangirling over every episode. And so I've been eagerly waiting to be able to join you to talk about pretty much anything, but being here to talk about Mae West, I'm particularly excited about. So
yeah, when
we
started looking
wheelhouse.
Well, that's the thing. I don't like to just randomly throw people into things. I like to kind of look at like, well, what are their strong suits? What do they love talking about? Because you want the best, like, excited response for each episode. Yes. And somebody who can really bring a lot to the table. Or in some cases, I'm just like, well, that guy's a perv, so I'll have him on that one. You know, literally my thought process on one episode.
Oh God.
I'm kidding. I'm not actually serious. Those were his words. Okay. Like,
if I need to be a perv, I'll do it. Like, that's fine.
Yeah. It's called morally offensive. We have to have some morally offensive people on the podcast or it doesn't work.
Right. It's
we'll
part
get
of the
a priest
bit.
eventually too. I want to have some balance in the force here. You know, it's just, you got to work with what you got. And today, obviously, we are talking about a film all three of us love. This is I'm No Angel, the Mae West classic, a controversial movie, a movie that it holds up so well, and a movie that really shows us, it's one of the great pre-code movies that shows what could have been had Hollywood not been censored from the 30s through the 1960s. It's an incredible film. There's so much about it that feels very modern. There's a lot that also feels dated, but I think the overall impact of the film is that it has held up in a lot of ways. So, Sara, obviously we met through your podcast. We went through my podcast, I think, initially. You found us, I found you, and I was like, oh my God, your podcast, Shea Cinema, is so incredible. You do it with your dad, and you talk about, you're going through the list of the Oscar noms and winners, right? That's like the whole bit.
Correct. Yeah. So our bit is essentially, it's a bucket list item. And so me and my father, who is in his late 70s, we are watching and reviewing every single film that has been nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. But we're going in chronological order because we are history nerds and we want to know everything that was happening in the world while these films were being made et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we are complete amateurs. The idea came out from me being forced to, and I enjoyed it, being forced to teach a high school film studies class. They basically dropped it in my lap and said, hey, you're doing this now. And that sort of is how the podcast came about. So I said, hey, I'm going to adapt this project that I made students do, and we're going to make it this whole big giant thing. So again, we do a lot of historical research. We're amateurs, and we're learning about cinema history and films and the Academy Awards and all of that as we're going along. We are currently in the middle of our 6th season, but it's been a wonky 6th season because we've had to take big breaks because my dad's been ill. And so we're actually right in the middle of 1933 right now in our podcast. And I think 2 episodes ago, we did She Done Him Wrong with
great
West.
Episode. Yep.
It absolutely is. So we were right in the same era. She Done Him Wrong, I think, was released maybe 10 months before this one is. And so, yeah, we just are in the thick of pre-codeness, and it's going to get weird once we leave pre-code and the production code is fully enforced and Hayes starts controlling everything, and I'm going to be very upset when that happens shortly. Yeah. I'm already angry about it.
It's really a weird thing to like learn about as an adult and come to through pre-code cinema, because some of these films were not easily available when I was a kid.
Correct.
A lot had come out on VHS because I feel like the 60s, the counterculture era, is when a lot of this stuff started coming back.
Right.
I know my dad talked about like seeing like Marx Brothers films screened at his college, for example, which a lot of them hadn't been shown unedited, for a very long time. At least like the Paramount years, not the Irving Thalberg era and post Thalberg era, but that's another story. So like, when I was a kid, a lot of these films, especially when we start talking about like Babyface, which we already did an episode on, Night Nurse, those films were not available. So I saw them in college on Turner Classic Movies, or later on just through like Criterion or through the Warner Brothers re-releases and things that I'd get from the library. And I didn't really understand how much film had changed between pre-code and the Hays Code, because I was aware of like pre-code through like Universal Horror. Like that was really like the stuff I saw that I didn't understand was pre-code, or like, the early Marx Brothers stuff. I just had no idea. I knew they were funny, and I knew there was something really impactful about them that was different than the films that would come maybe a few years later, but I never really understood the connection. And growing up Catholic, I don't know what your experience was growing up as a kid, but there definitely was like a sense the Hays Code was something good that we turned our backs on in the 1960s. Knowing your dad from the podcast, I doubt that was your experience, but I heard a lot of defenses of the Hays Code when I was growing up. That like, it forced people to be more creative, which I do kind of agree with that a little bit, but it was so limiting. You know what I mean? And the things it did to people and the people it kept out of the spotlight were just unforgivable.
Right. So it'd be an interesting question to pose to my father directly. But if you've listened to the show, then you know my dad, in terms of my cinema upbringing, there were essentially no limits. And he showed me pretty much anything that was available to rent because, we got our first I almost said DVD player. No, VHS player when they first came out. And so we got to watch all of this stuff at home. And it just happened to be, again, what was available. Many of these movies were not available, even on VHS. Some things were thought lost for a lot of years, but he didn't hold anything back. One of his guilty pleasures, I think if you've listened to, we have an episode on The Sign of the Cross, which he loved as a kid, but kind of knew that it was pushing the envelope on what was acceptable in terms of being raised Catholic. So he was raised in a really strict Catholic household. So was my mom. And I was raised, I would say, I won't say strict, but we went to church every Sunday. My dad was a lector. I was an altar server, which was kind of unusual at the time to be a girl altar server. I was got in trouble with a priest for being a girl altar server. We did Lenten dramas because there were a bunch of theater nerd adults in our parish. My dad was one of them and one of his good friends. So we put on fancy Catholic gospel plays during Lent, right? So We were in the thick of it. I was a youth minister, all of that type of stuff. But there was never a concept, at least in my house, that what was being shown in movies, from my dad's perspective, what was being shown in movies was bad. Everything was a learning tool, and you took all of it in. So I saw all of the stuff that I shouldn't have seen at a very young age. Like, he showed me Midnight Cowboy as soon as it was available for us to watch. I think I was about 11 years old when I saw that movie for the first time, because it's his favorite movie and he wanted to share it with me. So yeah.
That's wild.
It is, but that's also why I am the way I am.
Right.
So it's definitely, I can understand people saying the code forced filmmakers to be more creative, and there's something to be said about the implications of things not showing everything and not everything being incredibly explicit the way that they are now. But looking back on the code and the things that they're censoring just seems wild now in the 21st century, right?
Right.
And I think there were critics at the time that would even argue then it was wild. It was creating this.
Absolutely.
Like, my favorite terms for like critics and newspapers was it created a sanitized reality. Right. So it absolutely, like with what Bill's saying, is the Hays Code. Like, one thing you will see an after effect, like once you get to the films more post code or even towards the end, late 50s and early 60s, it kind of restructured like the narrative structure of films as well. And there were like greater uses of like symbolism, even in this film pre-code. But I think in the remaining Mae West films over the next like 8 years, you see a lot of the double entendres, right? And using, even like looking at earlier pre-code films like D.W. Griffith and things like that, with like using historical context as symbolism and things like that too, became more prevalent. And that's some of those creative ways. But yeah, I mean, that doesn't negate this complete sanitized sense of reality that it was creating.
Right. And I think one of the things that I've noticed in our journey of this historical context and everything like that, what is so wonderful, at least in this pre-code era, is the number of strong female characters and the things that they are able to do and the agency that they have, even if with the do nots and be carefuls that are in the code before it's fully enforced. Once it's fully enforced, those strong roles that seem to be the norm seem to fall away, and there aren't as many of them. That doesn't mean they don't exist at all, but that's part of what I'm sad about, because we're right around the corner from it, is recognizing that these meaty roles for women who are empowered and empowering and independent and strong and sexual are going to sort of fade into the background.
Oh, for sure. And it mimics literature. Like when the music, so you're going to start to see a huge rise in romance film, just like a romance literature. And you're going to see these like strong female characters subverted for the white knight characters can prevail. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and the place eventually where you still get them, obviously, is like film noir, Poverty Row pictures, things like that.
Right.
Like Poverty Row is like, if you want to see some crazy stuff from the 40s and 50s, listeners, look into Poverty Row films. I'm thinking like Detour is a great example of this. Some of the stuff Samuel Fuller was doing, Val Lewton. Like, there was so much stuff going on at like RKO and like the smaller, even like lower tier studios, especially, where they were just getting away with stuff because films would just go unrated and uncensored, and they kind of go to these like double feature bills for teenagers, essentially, which usually included horror or sci-fi or in the 50s, like
suspense.
Greaser
Such a
pictures.
Good one.
Yep. Edgar G. Ulmer's one really worth looking into. He did some incredible stuff after he basically got himself blackballed from the industry for sleeping with his friend's wife. But
don't.
But also, I have to say too, if we're going to talk about this, like strong female characters, Poverty Row, Adventures of Kitty O'Day. Such a good one.
Yes.
I'm literally writing this down because I haven't heard of that one. Adventures of Kitty O'Day. Got it.
So let me ask both of you. Why is it with the Hays Code? Because I'm trying to understand this. Why is it that we see the loss of the strong female archetype? Like Barbara Stanwyck did survive this, but the kind of role she was playing in Night Nurse and Babyface, that suddenly all goes away. Betty Boop, as I've said before, had to become a unmarried homemaker. Like Betty Boop loses the flapper dress. She's not nearly being as sensual as she was before. She's not going out to like jazz clubs. She's homemaking with a puppy. Why did that happen? Because I've looked through the don'ts, the do nots, and the be carefuls, and I'm trying to understand, was it just like their solution to not having her be sexual was just to remove any agency at all?
I see it as a solution to first wave feminism. So we're looking like already in the 1920s to 1930s. And like Mae West was a very vocal first wave feminist, right? She stood up for gay rights, spoke out frequently about like police brutality against homosexual men, things like that. And so like I see it as a religious and fear mongering response to first wave feminism. That's my take. Curious to see what you think.
Well, I'm even seeing this in what's going on this week at the Kennedy Center with President Trump, and the fact that he's removing, quote, woke artists he doesn't agree with from receiving awards. And Lord knows he's made threats to Hollywood to send Mel Gibson, John Voight, and some other asshole to Hollywood to basically, it sounds like, create some kind of new Hays Code or Breen office. And I'm sorry, Hays office. But it seems like he wants to create that kind of situation. Now, he's not made that threat recently, but seeing what's happening at the Kennedy Center has me concerned, because it is this very, Honora won Best Picture last year, right? And we're going from that into a year where now the president is a authoritarian who wants to control our arts and our culture. I see so many parallels between these two things. And Sara, I'm curious, are you seeing that parallel? But also, do you think it was a reaction to the wokeness of the time?
So the creation of the code is trying to deal with like the regional issues that are happening across the country at the time, I believe, right? And so their distribution laws and what you can show in certain areas, I believe, is part of why it was implemented in the first place, to deal with these regional problems of where movies are going to be shown and stuff like that. And I think without them actually fully putting it into place and trying to enforce it, you have filmmakers who are pushing back against the boundaries as much as they possibly can, right? As anybody who's given, don't do this, and you're like, but I'm going to do it just because you tell me that I can't do it. And so I do think it's a response to that first wave feminism, but it's also because they're pushing back against being told that they shouldn't be making certain types of things. Well, why can't I, right? We have a new medium with sound in particular. At the time, it's not that film was new. I mean, they've had porn, silent porn has existed just as long as film has, right? So none of these things are new, but the reaction to it does seem to be, it reaches a point where whoever's in power, is saying it's untenable at this point. It's too risky. Things are being pushed too far. Freaks is released, I think, about a year before this film is, and that really, really freaked people out in terms of what was acceptable to show on film, right?
Yep.
And it's interesting talking about what's going on in the Kennedy Center with Trump. So I live in Las Vegas. Mark Wahlberg moved here a couple of years ago, and he supposedly is trying, and he's, super Catholic.
Very Catholic.
Apparently
a performative Catholic, as I like to call him.
Who knows, right? Okay. So, and it's
a Catholic who could have stopped 9/11.
Well,
wait. Send me a memo about that later. I've not heard this.
That's his whole shtick.
What? He's
an action star. He could have taken everybody out by himself.
Yeah.
So every time my daughter and I drive by the area of town where he lives, we blast Good Vibrations. And I say, Marky Mark lives over there. So he is apparently trying to create a new studio system here in Las Vegas and wants to have it as a second Hollywood where they can make their own.
Yes, I've heard this. Okay.
Types of movies, right, that are on this more, I'll say generously, family-friendly bent, right?
Angel Studios 2.0, essentially.
Correct.
Except make it Catholic.
Right, and except make it not physically in Hollywood, because physically being in California, there's something in the water. Obviously, everybody's going nuts, so... Yeah, I see the same sort of thing happening at the same time right now as well. Again, especially with Honora, which is a film that I did not want to watch. I looked at trailers and I was like, this doesn't seem like a movie for me. But I watched it and said, oh, dang, this is way better than I was giving it credit for. I wrote it off just on principle alone.
Oh,
and
that's some good, yeah.
That movie is so good, and I sobbed through the second half just going, this is not what I was expecting at all. I was expecting trash, honestly, and it was
really?
very,
okay.
very good. Yeah.
I mean, I had seen his film Tangerine a few years ago, which was all shot on iPhones.
Yeah.
And I love that movie, so I kind of knew what to expect from Sean Baker, but also I get it, though, because like he's, specifically Honora thanks Jess Franco in the credits, which... If a film's thanking Jess Franco in the credits, I don't expect it to not be a bit of a trashy mess. You know what I mean? I wouldn't expect a film like Honora to be paying homage to that particular filmmaker. So,
and I'll tell you what, there's something about Honora that reminded me of this pre-code era, right? Where you have this trashy woman and everybody writes her off, but she really does have a heart of gold, and there's a redemption arc that happens to her, and it felt really familiar to me in a way. And so once I actually sat down and watched it and gave it a chance, I was blown away by it and had a really interesting conversation with my dad about it, and I'm trying to see if I can get him to actually watch it. Because he's really he's willing to watch a lot of stuff, but also he's getting old now and a little bit cranky.
Fair.
I kind of want to hear her take too, and you can totally cut me off if you feel like this is too tangential, but I feel like kind of mirroring this, I sort of wanted to talk about the whole Gal Gadot, Snow White, her recent comments about Snow White, Rachel Ziegler, about the film. Not that I'm praising it, as I could not watch that. The Disney kid in me will not watch The Seven Dwarfs like that. But she recently made comments, right, that the film flopped because of her Israeli heritage, because of her outspokenness, for being pro-Israel, and then also blaming Rachel Ziegler, which Donald Trump did, right, as tweeting about the film doing poorly because she put Free Palestine on her X account early on in the film's production, right? And Trump early on urging people not to see the film, these types of things, right? But Gal Gadot recently came out saying she feels like the film got panned because she's being labeled as a Zionist when she's not that, that she won't speak out in favor of Palestine, but she now said, you can't succeed in Hollywood unless you do, right? So it was giving me some Mae West vibes, right?
I didn't watch the movie because
it looks like hot garbage, if I'm being honest.
It does.
It does.
But the reason I didn't want to see the movie is actually because of Rachel Ziegler's comments when she was first given the role and trash talked the original. And it was like, well, I get what you're saying, but also why are you biting the hand that feeds you? And I already had Disney remake fatigue long before they ever announced that one. And I think that probably Gal Gadot is correct. You have to say certain things in order to be able to make a living, I suppose.
That's fair and true. And like part of the thing with the casting and everything as well as millennials are exactly like Sara said is, well, you're really spitting in the face of millennials. And she's like, well, this isn't for millennials. This is for new audiences. It's like, babe, you don't understand who's going to see
Lord.
this. But then also they're very much around the film's casting was this go woke, go broke mentality, right? I'm going to follow this week's episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It was a go woke, go broke episode, very timely, because they were casting, right, a woman of color in the role of Snow White. So we had people that weren't okay with that aspect, right, amongst other grievances. And so I think all of the fraught conversations surrounding arguably a not stellar film have been really interesting, though, and timely of this specific moment. And I think reflexive of what we can see going on in this period just a couple of years pre-Hays Code as well.
Well, and I think that, it points to Hollywood latches on to what is financially successful, and they do it over and over and over and over and over again. And we see that obviously right now in the current day, but that was true since the dawn of film, right? So you have the Broadway Melody, which was the second Best Picture winner, and it was one of something like 76 different musicals that year, okay? Because they just keep redoing the same thing over and over again, and Way leads on to Way, and it eventually reaches a point where there's oversaturation and people are done with it, and the Hollywood musical has gone through peaks and valleys over the decades of, okay, yes, we're done with this, and now they're out. Oh, they're back again. Oh, and now we're done with them. Oh, they're back again, and now we're done with them. And right now we seem to be in another peak with Wicked and all of that type of stuff. Great, fun, super exciting, but with these remakes that are going on, everything's being remade, and that's okay. Tons of classic movies have been remade. Sometimes the classic can be just as good as the original. We have 85 different versions of Pride and Prejudice, right? And people get into fist fights over which one's the best one. But it comes down to when I think you see studios are so focused on, we know that we can make money on this and we're going to do it kind of no matter what. So what's the point? Are we making art, or are we trying to print money? Right?
Well,
and I think people are reacting to that.
And another thing we need to consider, that's another parallel, is the recession. This is all happening during the Great Depression. We're in a massive, what really is a depression we've been in the last year, a couple of years here. And, Mae West is a moneymaker in 1933.
Yes.
That scares the moral majority at the time because she is so sexually, she has this agency. She's writing her own scripts, doing her own movies. She's coming from this Broadway background, and she's a middle-aged woman flaunting her sexuality. I mean, being 40 and just breaking into Hollywood in 1933, that's like being an old maid, right? As they would say.
100%.
We don't like that term, but that is what they would have considered her. And here she is pulling Cary Grant at a young age, which nice work if you can get it. I'm just saying. There's some hot scenes in this movie.
I mean, there are. And she's competing with, she's coming up at the same time, same age of Mary Pickford, even Lillian Gish,
right?
But they're in their prime, in their 20s, right? Like Mary Pickford thinking like Coquette in I want to say 1917, 1915. I could be wrong there,
right?
Lillian Gish, Intolerance of the Nation. It was not, obviously she was prone to controversial films as well. But they were, again, getting their start a lot earlier.
Well, and one of the things, too, is the roles that they were playing when they were younger were so different, right? Mary Pickford basically gives herself the Best Actress Oscar because she hasn't successfully made the transition into talkies at that point. She was known for playing these youthful ingenues who are so innocent and lovely, but there's kind of no place for her in that modern type of cinema that was being made at the time. You have people like Norma Shearer who are doing The Divorcee and who are basically a woman running around having all kinds of illicit sex, and that's what is selling at the time, right? So cute little young girl isn't working, and then it makes sense that Mae West, as an even older version of that, takes everyone by storm, but she was already a huge Broadway star and already engendered all of that controversy. So of course you're going to take the risk with her, bringing her to Hollywood in the hopes that the success that she had on the stage would translate to film. And it did, at least for a short amount of time.
And you have to
right.
remember,
and already an established writer, right? An established
Correct.
playwright, and coming in and even on her first film, even with a small role, writing her own dialogue, like rewriting her own dialogue.
Yeah.
It's 1933. The market collapses in 1929, and they really start feeling the effects in like 1930, 31. And so nobody's going to the movies. What are people doing right now? Not going to the movies for multiple reasons, but financial reasons are a big one right now. People are exhausted by superhero.
And it's also prohibition. Nobody can get drunk. They're pissed off.
We can't get high in Wisconsin, so I'm just going to throw that one in there. But, you know, people right now are so exhausted with superhero films. And granted, James Gunn's Superman's doing great, but it's a rethinking, a complete overhaul of the genre from what we've been seeing previously. And you have things like Honora doing surprisingly well at the box office because it's something different. Mae West is up there with like Frankenstein, right? These are things that are new, that are fresh, because studios are going, how the fuck are we going to get people into these seats? And Frankenstein is an answer. Mae West herself is an answer. And unfortunately, with that massive box office of these, quote, morally offensive films comes the backlash. What does the pushback to this look like from the Christians, from the Catholics, from the right? And how does that evolve, and how does that end up getting Mae West wrapped up in it?
William H. Hayes, we have, right, the originator, the enforcer. We've talked about before, he was previously chairman of Republican National Committee. He was a campaign manager for Warren G. Harding. He was also the postmaster general before he resigned and took over his role enforcing these guidelines. We have Joseph Breen, the director of the Production Code Administration. We also have, Hayes brought along some friends from the Postal Service as well, who were working more at state levels, especially New Jersey, New York. So we're thinking, obviously Mae West was well known in New York before making her way to Hollywood on Broadway. They followed her a bit. So there were, again, some friends and associates of Hayes that started trying to enforce not having her films promoted, right? Urging cities not to promote or market her films, which would hurt numbers. So like Klondike Annie was one of the first that it really ended up kind of hurting the film. One, she wasn't allowed to write her dialogue, but they were actively campaigning against the film and coercing theaters and cities to not market posters, word of mouth, newspapers, nothing for the films, and urging individual theaters not to play it either.
Before Klondike Annie, I know after this movie, there was a movie called it's not Every Day, it's Belle of the 90s, which was originally called It Ain't No Sin, if I'm correct in that. I think it's It Ain't No Sin. And the title alone was enough to get people pissed off. But then this was the first film I heard that this group trying to censor movies basically pushed back really hard in the press and got the studio to actually edit it and change the name to Belle of the 90s. And you can kind of see it. You can see her fingerprints on the script still, but you can see where there are things that have been changed or maybe don't feel like they're landing properly in a few spots. And it's kind of this, you can see the cracks starting to form. And by the time you get to Klondike Annie, it feels like Klondike Annie, just for everybody's perspective in the audience, basically the whole shtick with that is she's a criminal who then reforms herself by basically starting like a religious charity group. And then she ends up becoming a good person through that. So she's reformed. We now have to reform Mae West from her sinful ways in every movie she's in. And that gives you an idea of how drastically this affected her films.
And it started all the way in Broadway. Like, it started all the way in her Broadway career, because actually, like, people think like, oh, New York must have been like a more progressive area. We had Broadway, but it actually wasn't. And one of her later plays, The Drag, which dealt with themes of homosexuality and drag. She based on vaudeville actors. She actually, it opened in Connecticut and then had a showing in New Jersey. It never made it to Broadway.
Nope.
Because of the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice, who ended up having people that did move over to being part of like enforcement for the Hays Code as well. So she had, again, already built up this reputation in the 20s and 30s on Broadway.
There's stuff that she wrote that was never produced because it was too salacious. So the drag was one of them that sort of got some production, but they shut it down before it could make it. But there's scripts that plays that she wrote that they were like, it's never going to see the light of day. But she essentially had to write it to get it out of her system. And you have to wonder if she had been given free rein to produce whatever she wanted on Broadway, it could have changed the course of Broadway history as well as cinema history. And I think the thing that's interesting about this film in particular, and She Done Him Wrong, again, made before the code, but once the code was enforced in, I think it was July 1st, 1934.
34, yep.
Yeah. So half a year after this film comes out, things changed fundamentally. And I think it's in 1935, they started reevaluating things to re-release because they would re-release things. And She Done Him Wrong and this film, they were like, we can't re-release them. They have to be edited so much. Right. So they were censored up front. Okay. And there's lots of censorship that happened with the original versions of these films. And then when they reevaluated them in 1935, they're like, and we have to censor them even more. And they kept reevaluating them and reevaluating these films over and over again. And I think they even reevaluated it in 1949. And
50s.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Joseph Breen said at that time in 1949 that if they made some judicious cuts in the film, it would bring it within the strictly technical provisions of the code. No good will accrue to the industry among right-thinking people with the release of a Mae West picture. On the contrary, it would appear to me that we would expose ourselves to the charge that we were letting down the bars, that we were again making filthy pictures, as was the charge leveled against the industry from 1,000 sources back in 1933 and 1934.
Well, I think you and I just discovered, working on this podcast episode, that film was not considered free speech. In 1915, the Supreme Court ruled that film was not covered under free speech or artistic expression. And that didn't get reversed until 1952, which is wild to consider. But it makes sense that that's when the deterioration of the Hays Code starts, because our listeners may not know this. If they haven't listened to the Babyface episode, I really recommend go back and listen to the episode with Jess about Babyface.
It's so good.
We had a blast. But it's a great episode to listen to get, because I'm trying to rehash some of it just to give new listeners some familiarity, but I don't want to dig too deep into it. But what's interesting is that the Hays Code was self-censorship. We have to remember this is Hollywood agreeing to be censored so the government would not try to censor them directly, which, given the Supreme Court ruling of 1915, there was very much grounds for them to do that. So Hollywood erred on the side of, we will do this internally. Now in 52, once the Supreme Court says this is covered under free speech, it seems like a lot of people start feeling like, well, if it is covered under free speech, what's anyone going to do if we stop self-censoring? And that seems like, I mean, it doesn't happen right away, but you start to see the cracks around 52, right? You've got Baby Doll from Elia Kazan coming in. You've got Otto Preminger with The Moon is Blue. So all these films are starting to kind of just, these directors, especially Preminger was a big part of this, Billy Wilder, just chipping away at the standards. And eventually they get rid of it in the 60s.
So Jess, I was going to ask, because weren't there, so the risk of not following the code, right, was either the film wouldn't be released at all, but there also could be some pretty hefty fines that were being incurred, not just on the part of the studio, but even in theaters that were showing films, right?
Correct. And so, one, I want to start with like Bill's distinction, I think, is so important, because like that Supreme Court ruling, it deemed the film industry that is purely and simply a business, right? So therefore its conduct originates for profit, so it's subject to government censorship. But the Hays Code isn't government censorship, right? It's a private entity. And so it's censorship trying to evade the government censoring an industry, right? But then, yes, so Sarah, like you said, you have individual theaters where we think about theaters are already transitioning from vaudeville theaters to film theaters. That's costly. Then we have sound coming in. That's costly. They can't afford to be getting fined. So there would actually be smaller theaters like Nickelodeon's that had been transitioned that would get fined out of existence for showing banned films. It also varied greatly depending on like municipality and where you were. Like I said, New York was a hot spot, for this, because you had, so like at the time, sorry to crap all over the YMCA, but at the time, the Young Men's Club in New York was really like, they were Hayes' cronies that were going around to these theaters and stuff and reporting things. So yeah,
that's such a wild connection. Wow.
Yeah. And having, trickling down fines. So from production companies to directors, pulling from contractual pay for actors and actresses and things like that as well. It could also lead to actors and actresses having, again, we know star power with production companies at the time, getting their contracts dissolved. So there were really hefty consequences, and a lot of it, even if they didn't follow the religious reasons for the censorship, it was a financial reason or just hoping for the longevity of Hollywood as well.
So tell me about sex real quick, because obviously not sex in general, the play. But
the play. I knew exactly what you meant.
I'm like, Kelly should have that talk with you about
when a mommy and a daddy love each other very much.
I heard you put a nickel in the player piano. That's a joke from the Babyface episode, by the way.
Yes,
but she had the plays.
The 1926 play.
Yes. Yes, the 1926 play and the outcome of that, what Mae West actually did as a publicity. Well, it was funny because it sounds like she got in trouble, but she made a decision to essentially boost the publicity of the play. If you can expand on that a little bit.
So she worked under her pseudonym when she was a playwright, right? Jane Mast. But this was, 1926 was written for Broadway. It got horrible critical reviews, but commercially it was extremely successful, word of mouth controversy. So much so that it was shut down by the New York City police due to obscenity. And she was sentenced to 10 days in jail, served 8 for good behavior. But Sarah, I don't know if you know about her whole kind of little, and she alluded to very good behavior while she was in there, right?
Didn't she have dinner with like the warden and the warden's wife, and she wore her lace underwear?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
90s. And this is what she says, right? She goes on this little media tour when she gets out that she got out for wink, wink, good behavior. She had fine dining. She visited the warden's house. She dined with him and his wife. She didn't wear the normal burlap outfit that prisoners were given, right? She had her silk lingerie, and word of mouth, it just kept spreading on. Yeah,
and people went to see it in droves, but she was so willing. She absolutely was like, "Yep, take me to jail. Like, I'm guilty as charged," and all of this negative publicity was great publicity.
Well, and I think that if I remember correctly, too, there was some sort of fine she could have paid to stay out of jail, but she consciously went to jail.
Correct.
Because she knew it would be good for business, which is hilarious. I love that.
She did not want to brush it under the rug at all. She wanted everyone to know that she was going to jail for her obscene play, which if you read what the play is, but really not as bad as everyone makes it out to be.
No, I'm sure.
And it was great too, she said like paying the fine would have been against like her feminist morality, right? Like it would have been giving in to the man. But that's right. It was.
You know,
It was absolutely a publicity stunt.
Growing up Catholic, something I've learned is usually when people hand wring and pearl clutch about a movie, it's not nearly as cool as they make it out to be. You know what I mean? Like it's or it's bad. Like there are a few exceptions. I mean, but the exceptions are things I've never heard them talk about. I've never heard a Catholic, you know, wax on about how they hated Salo, 100 Days of Sodom. You know what I mean? Or like how they hated a Serbian film. They'll be like, this Disney movie had a gay in it, and you're like, that's okay. It's still a Disney movie. You're weird.
A friend of mine were both traumatized by E.T. and Willy Wonka.
Oh, fuck that movie. I mean, E.T. specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, E.T. But she and some other friends did an episode on their podcast on Salo, and they were like, yeah, it's pretty tough to watch. And I've read 120 Days of Sodom, and she and I both said that we would rather sit and watch Salo on repeat forever but excise E.T. from existence, because one was fundamentally traumatizing as a child, but we could totally watch people eat poop on film.
I love Steven to death, but that scene where he's sick with the FBI.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's a horror film. It's a horror film.
I can handle a little manja over E.T. dying. Okay, like manja.
Am I just dead inside? Because none of that is triggering to me.
You know, this movie, I should mention, directed by Wesley Ruggles, who you don't think, Sarah, what is your opinion of Wesley Ruggles as director? You spent a lot of time in Wesley Ruggles land.
I mean, I have spent a lot of time in Wesley Ruggles land, and I don't like it other than this film. So Wesley, Wesley Ruggles is the director of Cimarron, which won the Academy Award for Outstanding Production in 1931, and it is my most hated film that Dad and I have watched for our project. It is. We have a whole episode on it. You can listen to me rage about it. Yancey Cravat, the character, is one of the worst characters who's ever been committed to celluloid. I haven't read the book. Dad read the book because I don't like Edna Ferber novels, but it's a whole. I have lots of issues with that film and that story in particular, as well as choices being made at the time that do not age well. Particularly treatment of Black characters, for example, as well as Native American. It's a hot
a Western in the early
mess.
30s not treating Black or Indigenous characters properly. I'm so shocked.
So it's funny because Wesley Ruggles and the way that his Black characters in Cimarron are treated and the way the Black characters in this film are treated, there's still some issues in this film, but it's a huge difference. But the difference, I will tell you 100%, is because it's a Mae West film and not a Wesley Ruggles film in particular.
That totally scans for me, honestly. Like, that totally makes sense.
Yeah. She was a huge proponent of supporting minority performers and really went to bat for them on Broadway as well as in film. So anyway.
And in real life, my favorite story about her is when she lived in an apartment building called the Ravenswood, I believe it was in Los Angeles. And the policy of the building was that no Black men were allowed in the building, like no Black people in general, but like you couldn't have a man over if he was Black. Well, obviously Mae West, a big fan of the men, all men.
All of the men.
She proceeded to buy the building and eliminated all of those stupid HOA rules. And I love that about her. That's such a queen move. Just buy the building and tell them to fuck off. Love it.
Well, and that's what her character does in She Done Him Wrong. She buys a building so that a mission can continue to function. So, yeah.
Well, this film opens up at a sideshow in a traveling circus, which is one of my favorite ways for movies to open. Especially back in this day, this is kind of after the decline of the circus starts, but we still have traveling circuses around. And this is kind of a callback to her days as a cooch dancer, as what it was called. And it's very much vaudeville and smaller stages even type of performance, very influenced by Black dance and culture. Jess, what can you tell us about the sort of like scene setting of this movie, the way that it informs her character with her own background, and then just some of the stuff about her singing? Because I feel like these interactions with the men are really interesting. The way that this plays out later in the movie.
Tyra obviously is a sideshow performer, not really making a living at this, right? Has a side hustle. Dreams of, as most performers do, dreams of life beyond the sideshow. So she's running a side hustle with her boyfriend Slick, right? Who is essentially a pickpocket of the male patrons while she's dancing. But the film really takes a turn. Again, just to do a broad sweep here, it takes a turn one night when a robbery Slick's doing kind of goes wrong. So Tyra takes this gentleman up to her, or back to, I guess, her trailer, her room. Slick comes in, gets jealous, and ends up essentially what he thinks is kill this man. She wants to pack up and leave. He decides, you don't makes him pray over the man. You don't rob a dead man, right? Well, Slick does, right? The guy's not dead. Wakes up, realizes his ring is missing, goes to the police. But we don't see much of it, right? Not until the end when he pops up again. But essentially, Tyra wants to get out. So she goes to see Big Bill, and she wants a loan because she's got to get away, get out of trouble. And Big Bill uses this as leverage to keep Tyra, because that night she didn't want to perform with the lions, right? She didn't want to do her lion taming act. So he ups the ante. He says, what if instead of putting your hand in the lion's mouth, you put your head in the lion's mouth? And I just want to highlight, I think the whole lion taming scene is fantastic. One, when she rides in on the elephant, that is actually Mae West riding in on an elephant.
Yes.
And
wow. I wonder if it was a stunt double. Okay.
No, it's actually
it's her.
Wow.
And I just think the superimposition and stuff with the lions, sort of CGI, early CGI.
It's very creative.
Is phenomenal.
Yeah.
It really is.
The time period, yeah. I mean, it's, it looks cheap by modern standards, but if you understand the time period.
But yeah, that was really well done to not shy away from that. They could have just talked about it after, but to attempt to show that, to really lean into the risk taking with it, I think was fantastic. Right. So she does that. She does the lion act. It takes off big time. Right. So she is traveling around. She's the talk of the town. She ends up meeting fancy, well-to-do people, ends up kind of having this guy in New York City, right? Kirk Lawrence, take up with her, buying her lots of extravagant gifts. Again, you can tell it's not love, right? But he already has a fiance who definitely looks down on Tyra, right?
Yes.
Talks ill of her with her friends. But Kirk is smitten with her. Cary Grant comes in, Jack Clayton. He is Kirk Lawrence's cousin, and his job is to go and visit her and get her to leave him alone. Tell her he's already engaged, just go find a different man. And instead, of course, she works her charms, and he ends up falling in love with her, but she's also in love with him, right? But it just so happens he's even more rich than his cousin.
Of course.
Yes. Just but it's true love, right? So they end up very quickly getting engaged. But again, come back to Big Bill, can't lose his top performer because she's going to get engaged, this wealthy man. She's leaving the circus for good. So he sends, we got Slick coming back in, right? He breaks into her apartment. It kind of sounds like he's going to also kind of maybe rob her a little bit from her apartment. But the goal is that he acts as though they're together. And when Cary Grant's character, Jack, comes and he falls for it. He takes off, leaves town, sends her a telegram that wedding's off, right? And it's devastating to her. She's at her wedding dress fitting, right? And it's over. And she wants to sue him for a breach of promise, right?
Which is a thing that you could actually do.
Yes.
Right. So part of what is really interesting about marriage and stuff at the time, if you needed to get a divorce, you needed to have a legitimate reason. One of the easiest ways to get divorced, because it was very, very complicated, the time was catching your spouse in a compromising position. So the musical The Gay Divorcee, for example, starring Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, which is going to come out about a year from now, the whole plot is Ginger Rogers needs to get a divorce. And so they hire someone to show up in her bedroom so that her husband catches her in the arms of another man so that he will divorce her. Okay, so the setup of Slick showing up in her bedroom, even though they're not married, is a way to force Cary Grant's character to call off the wedding. But when you've been engaged, there is a thing called breach of promise. You promised to marry me, and now you're saying no because she doesn't know that Slick was ever involved. Okay, right. She has no clue that this other guy has shown up to ruin things. And so she thinks he promised to marry me and now he's leaving me. And so she's told, we can't do this because it's going to look really bad for us. But there's like legal implications to go through if your fiance says, I don't want to get married anymore. It's wild. It's wild.
Particularly for women. So
correct.
This period, we're talking like 1880s until now. Any woman who wanted a divorce. So a little bit of a segue, but Christina Hendricks' character in the show The Buccaneers, Apple TV show, goes through this in the U.S. So her daughters are in the U.K. trying to marry lords and all of that. But she wants to divorce her philandering husband in the U.S. and goes through this just heinous trial. And it is extremely reminiscent of what's still going on at this time, particularly if you are a woman and you get like dragged through the mud in the court proceedings, which they were trying to do to her Mae West character in this film, right? Because she... like Sara said, for breach of contract, they say like, well, do you want to sue for damages? She says no, right? Because I'm not damaged, right? Letting off this air that like it didn't hurt her. It's just that he made a promise he was going to take care of her. She was going to get out of the circus, but she is hurt, right? But it goes to court. Cary Grant, you can see his character is still very much in love with her. Even, you know, she's making quips and jokes in her innuendo. She's flirting with the elderly judge. And she goes through this court hearing. And it almost reminded me of like the finale of Seinfeld, where every person they've ever wronged is brought
yes. Right. Yes. Yes.
And yeah, all of these men she's ever interacted with are there, including the man that she and Slick thought they killed. And things don't seem to really be going her way until she takes over. She gets to interview them and make them out to be the men that they actually are, right? Instead of putting everything on her. They were the ones who were engaged. They were the ones that followed and pursued her. She didn't actually kiss them. She wasn't actually sleeping with them, all these different things. She wasn't asking for this or that. And it's kind of, it becomes this, I think
circus.
Yeah. And Sarah can agree. Usually these trials are really heinous for the women. She fully took charge, and it was a really empowering actually few days, to the point where she's got jurors calling her, sending her flowers. They fell in love with her. The judge is at her apartment, her loft.
The judge is so good in this.
Cary Grant drops the case. She gets the money, right? But that's not what she wanted at the end, right? When he shows up, she's aware then of what Slick did, after she gets to defame Slick in front of the whole court for being just nothing but a scoundrel and a criminal. And Cary Grant takes her back and she rips up that check, right? She doesn't need it anymore. It was all about love.
It's, the whole thing is shenanigans. And here's the thing, everyone who meets her falls in love with her. And what's great about the opening sequence when she's doing the coochie dance and she's got this fantastic costume on, and it's endless shots of men drooling over her no matter what she's doing, and they're all just so excited to see her. So even without her getting into the big show with this traveling circus with the lions, she's essentially the moneymaker for this small town act that's going on. And she is back in her room and she's talking with her. I think another performer comes in and says, oh, you have all of these amazing jewelry and stuff, and she has like a vision board with all of these pictures
so good.
of the different men who have given her pictures, and she says, oh, well, this I got from this guy, and this scarf I got from this guy, and these earrings I got from this guy. So she literally has like the quote unquote receipts of all of the men that have fallen in love with her and given her all of these things. And so yeah, there's the side hustle she has with Slick, where Slick robs men, but men just give her stuff. Mm-hmm. So she looks like $1 million because of the things that men have given her. And so it gives this impression at the beginning of the film that she has done some maybe saucy things in order to get all of these gifts. And by the time you get to the trial at the end and everyone who is watching is falling in love with her, why wouldn't you fall in love with her? It's Mae West. Mae West is 100% a woman that I would want to date. Like, she is so charming and so beautiful, and I am taken in with her 100% of the time. And then she reveals, like, I wasn't actually doing anything wrong. People gave me all of this stuff. One of the maids says, you always struck me, or it might be specifically Hattie McDaniel as her manicurist says, you always struck me as a one-woman man. And she says, yeah, one man at a time, right? While kind of keeping up appearances that she's this man-eater. But it is said that she really is looking for love, right? And that she hasn't taken on all of these men. And then it's revealed that she really is this kind of pure-hearted woman, and yay, everything's happy at the end, and we tie it up with a little bow, and it's really cute, but everyone is drooling over her. But why wouldn't they? Because it's Mae West.
Well, and I love the fact that she's not a typical lead at all for this time period too. You're talking about a middle-aged woman who's pulling young Cary Grant, and I mean, it's, you know, the age disparity is definitely, it's, I mean, if you think about it, it's the 50s. You've got Douglas Sirk making movies about the age disparity between an older woman and young Rock Hudson. It's interesting that this movie doesn't pass judgment on this the way that in 20 years movies would pass judgment, but also movies like Douglas Sirk's All That Heaven Allows, you know, it challenges the very common societal notions that, like, it's inappropriate for Jane Wyman to be pursuing Rock Hudson. It's treated very naturally here. I mean, hell, when I was in my 20s, the quote cougar thing was happening, and, you know, it was like this socially earth-shaking thing that, like, younger men were dating older women, and, like, it was still treated as even kind of weird. I mean, I dated older women in my 20s who were, like, quite a bit older than me, and, you know, I dealt with a lot of prejudice from people I knew about it. I got a lot of crap about it.
But she's only 11 years older than Cary Grant in this. But isn't she and Myra Breckenridge in the 70s, and she's like in her 80s at that point, and she teams up with Tom Selleck, who is actually significantly younger than her, correct? Yeah.
Yes. Also in Sextette as well. And I mean, but granted, Sextette, huge bomb when it comes out. But part of that was the 70s. They were over musicals and over like all that stuff. So they didn't really, they were like, we don't like what you're selling. And, you know, I think it's like, but even this is like a 10-year difference was a big deal back then in media, at least. I mean, in real life, people, but especially when it's the older woman, like an older man and a younger woman, no big deal. Older woman, younger man, we have a problem, even if it's only 10 years. So it's interesting that this movie never comments on it and never like judges her for that. And I think that's really cool, but that's a pre-code thing, right? We see that in pre-code all the time. This movie has so many similarities to Babyface in the way that her character acts. She's just doing what she has to do to get by and move up in the world. And you don't see that as much after 1934. Sara, you mentioned the board with all the men on it, but something really cool about that board, if you look at it, I noticed this time, is that there are black men on her board, which is like a subtle way of her giving a big middle finger to the studios and society. You know, this movie to a modern audience looks really dated when it comes to the way that the black actors are used in the movie, the way that they are cast, and the roles they fulfill. But from what I understand, Mae West is actually doing things in this movie that kind of undermine the studio's desires for having these stereotypes to be very much, you know, the classic mammy and step and fetch it roles. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So I think what sets this film apart is, first of all, like going back to the carnival scenes, there are Black performers. We traditionally wouldn't have seen that. Like actual performers, we would have seen them more
Right.
cleanup crew, roadies, that type of role. And we do have, I think, again, a departure from the stereotypical mammy roles, right? It would be like Beulah, Libby, and then the Sarah brought the manicurist. They're not just maids, like they're her confidants.
Yes.
They're depicted almost as her friends.
Yes.
They also themselves are, let's be honest, risque ladies of the
yes,
time.
they are.
And right? They're sexually active on the town as well.
Right.
And they're sharing this with her. And again, like a confidant to the point of being subpoenaed, Beulah being subpoenaed in the court scene because she is so knowing of Tyra's character and that side of her life because they've shared so much of it together.
That scene with her maids is actually my favorite scene in the movie because it is showing just these female characters in general, but mixed race, right? So you have obviously Mae West as the singular white woman surrounded by these Black women who are playing the very traditional maid roles. And Hattie McDaniel, of course, goes on to win the first Academy Award, won by a Black actress in Gone with the Wind several years later, playing the very traditional mammy role. But I think it's
arguably the most interesting character in Gone with the Wind, though, which is ironic.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And she famously talked about how she didn't mind playing maids because she got paid more to play a maid in film than she would have being a maid in real life. And famously supported by Clark Gable when she wasn't allowed to attend the awards and all of that type of stuff. But Libby's character says that she's been married, I think, 4 times. Okay. And Mae West asks, what kind of men do you like? And she says, I like the dark men. And she says, you should go back to Africa. You could do really, really well. Yeah. But also that's the suggestion, right? That super dark men are incredibly sexual. And that's what they're going after. So I love the camaraderie among all of them together because the white women that she encounters, except for the few white women who are like, oh, she's so fun and we loved her, she was amazing, she's a villain, right? So Mae West is a villain who's stealing all of the men, and she's not actually, but she gets to be herself with her maids who are actually her friends, and they get a ton of dialogue and they get a ton of funny quips that you don't normally get to see. She had the same thing with Louise Beavers in She Done Him Wrong, who is an incredible actress and is, I think in 1934, she was in like 9 different films, and 2 of them were nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture. So Mae West specifically would seek out these types of performers in order to give them a chance to be on film, to be seen, to make their careers essentially, and other people weren't willing to do the same. And she was.
You can tell she actually worked that circuit because the people she is most natural with as an actor in the movie are the Black actresses she's working with. So you can tell that's the world she comes from. She doesn't come from high society. And even when she's like fancy and dressed up, she still feels working class as fuck in this movie. And I love that.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, and it's like her fashion and stuff too. Like she credited that with Black culture and dress at the time. Yes. And also, like, not a fun fact, but like a heart-wrenching fact, and that really shows what was going on industrially at the time. So we do have Hattie McDaniel being the first Black actress nominated for and winning an Academy Award in 1940 for Gone with the Wind, but not even getting to like really accept that award or celebrate because she was sitting in the back at a segregated table at the award show, right? Having a horrible experience with that. We also have Mae West, who was offered a role in Gone with the Wind and turned it down because it wasn't a big enough role for her. But her stating she wanted a chance to work with Hattie again just because of how positive her experience with her had been. But again, like crediting, like it's hard to talk about this film and not talk about her the wardrobe and the costuming for it, and where that inspiration came from. But also just like her mannerisms, her way of speaking, her famous walk, right? Which started back in her Broadway career with her custom 6-inch platforms to give her that famous kind of swaggering walk.
You know, it's her walk because, like, if you watch those old cartoons from like Warner Brothers and MGM, where a bird character might look like Mae West with like the big chest puffed up and everything, and she's
Bosoms.
just going, oh.
Well, and I told
and you know who it is right away.
I told you on my DVD collection, in order to watch that there's a cartoon short that was included called She Done Him Right. And it is essentially Mae West as a dog, and her name is Poodles, I think.
That's
and so you
awesome.
basically have sexy Mae West dog doing the little sachet walk, and she keeps going and I'm just like, give me more of that. It's so hot.
I think I believe it's the Disney film Who Killed Cock Robin, which I believe was a silly symphony where one of the birds is a Mae West bird, and it's just, you know, right away who it is. So she has like a profile, she has a shtick that you, even as a kid, I clocked it. I was like, I don't know who that is, but I've seen that lady before.
Yeah, so this is what she looks like in the film.
We'll have to throw that. We'll throw it on the socials. Wow, that's well, that's way too sexy for 1930s cartoon. I'm uncomfortable.
Can we segue from talking about her tonality and voice to how that voice just makes all of these like innuendos and double entendres throughout the film that she's delivering?
So good.
No, she has an incredible delivery. I mean, it's just every one-liner in this is perfect. Every single one lands 100%. And I don't think she has that after this movie. This is the final movie where it's like you get like She Done Him Wrong, this one, and it's like diminishing returns after this, unfortunately.
Yeah,
because of the code.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of it, and there's
right.
her stating as well in films after the code starts being implemented that she, when looking at the original scripts that she wrote, the dialogue she makes it so raunchy, knowing things will get cut, so she can keep, some of those innuendos and things, right? Like thinking about like when Kirk wants to come back in the room, right? But he knows or back in her dressing room, but he knows his fiance doesn't want him to, so he leaves his cane behind. And you mean you planted that stick on purpose? It's just amazing.
And she gets all of the best lines because she writes them herself, right? And I mean, the whole thing is you could quote the whole movie and it's just sexy line after sexy line after sexy line, right? I'm very quick in a slow way, right? Or you fascinate me. You'd better go. And and of course, my favorite line of all time, probably in all movies, is from this film. When I'm good, I'm very good. But when I'm bad, I'm better.
Yes.
So delicious. And the way that she says it, and it's so sort of, what's the proper word I'm looking for? Languorous. Her delivery is just so aloof and yet piercing at the same time. It's just delicious the way that she talks and the way that she
her energy is incredible. Like her energy and her charisma is insane. I mean, like the scene with Cary Grant where he cannot leave because she looks like she's about to pounce on him and just rip him to shreds is one of the sexiest things in a pre-code movie ever. You're just like, there's so much tension in this room.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yes, and in the modern era, they would be naked in 2 seconds, right? Like we're gonna lay the pipe and we're gonna be good to go. And the thing is, when she's talking, it's like she barely opens her mouth when she's talking because her eyes are doing these really incredible. It's impossible to describe. You just have to see it and experience it, and she comes across on film in a way that is so sultry and so seductive. And how does she do it? She just does,
Right. Well, and I've got some quotes too. Jess, do you have some favorite quotes that we haven't talked about?
I mean, we've already covered the 3 that I had, but so I'll let you talk about the quotes because I want to talk about what you guys think about her character. Because Mae West herself loved horoscopes and the numbers, so I do want to talk about that after we. So if you want to do the quotes first,
well, it's actually convenient because I did want to talk about the Raja, the man who plays Raja, the fortune teller. One of my favorite lines of this movie, because it's a weird slow burn the way you react to it, but he says she goes to him for her horoscope because she's obsessed with horoscopes, which, like you said, Mae West in real life, very much into her horoscope. And he says, I see a change of position. And she says, sitting or reclining. And like at first you're like thinking like this is a chair sitting thing, and then when you really think about it, you're like, no, it's Mae West. This means something very specific about positions. Okay, like and like the first time I saw it, I kind of chuckled, and then I like a half second later I was like, oh my god,
it's so dirty without being dirty.
It's like a magic. It's like watching a magician who's really good at what they do, and you're like, how the hell did they do that? Because you don't know how. Only she could have pulled that line off that way. And that's what's so cool about this movie. It's like watching a trained like master magician, except delivering sexual innuendos.
Yes.
And like you said, Jess, you want to talk about the horoscopes. This is such an integral part of Mae West's life in real life, correct? There's a lot in here that mirrors reality.
Same birthday, the August 17th is Mae West's actual birthday. That's also Tyra's birthday. And I found it interesting too that like we have this self-possessed woman who you feel like is making these choices and things, but a lot's happening to her too, right? Because she's not asking for anything. These men are just, they're drawn to her. They're lavishing these things on her. But also it's just really interesting that the self-possessed woman is like really reliant on the horoscope, right? So you kind of get this feeling that the only reason I don't doubt that she loves Cary Grant's character, right? But it's like the only reason she lets herself fall for him is because he also fits the description of the man that she's meant to fall for based on her horoscope, because he's very similar to Kirk, right? So he could just be a stand-in there. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, and it is interesting how she brings a lot of her own personal life into these movies. Something else I want to talk about as well is just her comedic approach in this movie. Now, I don't know if this is a Ruggles decision or a Mae West decision, but it's something I see a lot in movies from this period, and it's something we don't do anymore, is the two shot. Do you notice the two shots between her and Cary Grant or her and some of the other men? It's really interesting to see the way that the two shot with no cuts in between allows her to kind of work in real time with the comedy. Like, so the comedy is not being created by cuts. It's actually like allowing her to perform. And I feel like we don't see this anymore. And it's such a cool thing to watch. I see it a lot in like Ernst Lubitsch movies. The Marx Brothers do it all the time, partially because those guys could not be controlled and it was the easiest way to get them to like just do the thing. But it's really cool to see it in these movies, and you wonder, like, could we bring that back? Could we bring back the comedy two shot that just allows the two actors to play the bit out without interrupting them? I find that fascinating to watch in these old movies. Also, evidently, this film was FDR's favorite movie. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Unexpected.
A weird fact from our evidently a man who loved him some Mae West. And I really want to get into some of the behind the scenes on this movie. We mentioned the effects with the lions, which I found, again, they were advanced for their time. You have to look at it in that context. But one of the biggest special effects to me in this movie are the costumes of Travis Banton, who was Paramount's main costume designer, head kind of costume guy during this time period. He's working on all the Paramount stuff. So like the prestige sort of the Ernst Lubitsch movies, if you've seen any of that stuff. I think we talked about him when we did our episode on Design for Living. We touched on the work of Travis Banton. And I mean, like, what's your favorite gown in this one? For me, it's the spider gown. That has to be number one. It's just ultimate goth 100%. Dress in this movie.
100%.
I'm obsessed with the lion tamer outfit. It very much gives like frilly, but also My Chemical Romance a little bit.
Oh,
and
that's
also
true, yeah.
And also she's wearing pants, so you get to see her legs, okay, which you can see to a certain extent in her coochie kind of see-through outfit at the very beginning. So I would agree, like, it's my first one is definitely spider dress, because holy moly.
Yeah, that thing is amazing.
And it literally has a spider like on her side, but the lion tamer dress, because she's in pants and you can see her legs, and it gives this sense of impropriety, right? And because of the color, it's a lighter colored outfit, right? So then we can pretend that we're seeing her skin instead of, probably just white, not leggings, but you know what I mean.
And I mean, Banton's kind of like the master of the pre-code movie in a way, because he's doing all that early Lubitsch stuff. He sticks with Lubitsch even past the code. Lubitsch obviously known for his kind of balancing of very dirty humor with very refined taste, and it's called the Lubitsch touch for a reason. It's a very delicate way of being very, very naughty. And then, of course, he also worked on all of the von Sternberg and Marlene Dietrich movies. You've got Blonde Venus, Scarlet Empress, which we are going to do on this podcast at some point because it's a fucking bonkers movie. It's one of the best movies. It's so weird and good, and like she has, it just goes very S&M by the end of the movie. Like it's a so crazy movie. It's so good. And again, Travis Banton on all Supernatural. Carol Lombard's another one. Like there are just some great. The Story of Temple Drake with Miriam Hopkins. So. I recommend
Cleopatra Cleopatra with Claudette Colbert. Oh my gosh, the costumes in that film, but particularly Claudette Colbert's gowns.
Oh yeah,
if you want to call them, are just so incredibly sexy and over the top. He knows how to dress women. For sure.
Wait, I'm going to challenge this. Did he do the Claudette Colbert Cleopatra?
No, he did.
Okay, he did. I just wanted to check because I wasn't.
He did.
Seeing that.
I researched it. It's one of my favorite movies. I love DeMille in this era. Sign of the Cross, Cleopatra. It's all so deliciously ridiculous and pushing against every social moray of the time.
Yeah, DeMille's an interesting character just in terms of film history, because he was a Jewish man making very dirty Christian movies that Christians love. Which is like such a weird, it's just such a weird credit to have. It's like, when I grew up, I always associated with him, my mom or people would bring him up, be like, oh, Cecil B. DeMille, he's like the greatest. And then you grow up and you're like, he's not really the greatest, but he's ridiculous and just grandiose.
And that's why I love him.
Exactly.
He is ridiculous. That's why when I appeared on another podcast, The Revisionist Almanac, and we covered the movies that were nominated from 1934 that went on to win in 1935. And I actually wrote a little essay about Cecil B. DeMille and why I just thought he knows exactly what he's doing and he's so over the top, and I just buy into it. And Frank Capra is a great director as well. He won Best Director and Best Film for It Happened One Night, but that's the same year as Cleopatra. And Cleopatra is a tour de force. You have naked Claudette Colbert bathing in a pool of milk with little kittens drinking milk as one of her friends descends naked. She literally says, "Take off your clothes and get in here." It's delicious.
That movie is wild. Four Frightened People's another one. The Crusades. Yeah, no, like DeMille's definitely good. Like part of this whole pre-code thing. And again, now I just want to do an episode on DeMille because,
of course, because he's great.
Maybe for Easter we can do something. So something that's hard with a lot of these old movies, it's really hard to explain to people who don't watch pre-code cinema or 30 cinema who these bit actors are. But once you start watching a lot of these movies, you start seeing them in other things, you start connecting the dots, or you realize that maybe they show up in something when they're older that you're very familiar with. Sarah, what can you tell me about guys like Gregory Ratoff and Edward Arnold?
So these guys are character actors at the time, and they're doing a lot of appearances and a lot of different things. So Gregory Ratoff is Pinkowitz, Mae West's lawyer or not. Yeah. Lawyer. And then you have you said Ralph
Edward
Harold
Arnold.
as Edward Arnold. Yeah. As Big Bill. Yeah. And so they are in so many movies at the time doing all of these bit parts, and you see them over and over and over again, and they aren't really ever taking on these big huge roles, but they are like always there, always everywhere. And then you have weird crossovers too, because Clayton's lawyer, so Cary Grant's lawyer, is actually Irving Pickle, who was a really big actor at the time, but he also was transitioning into becoming a director, and he actually directs The Most Dangerous Game with Marion C. Cooper and Ernest B. Schoedsack, which they were making at the same time as King Kong. We have an episode on that film. So you have all of these people who are just permeating all of these different areas of cinema history and so they're kind of like insidious. They're everywhere, and you recognize their faces and you go, where have I seen them before? And then you can't quite put your finger on it. So, I mean,
Edward Arnold, I know immediately because of Frank Capra and my obsession with Frank Capra's movies. Right. So for me, it's like, but then there's guys like Gregory Ratoff where I'm like, I know this guy. And then I'm realizing, All About Eve. Okay. So like 50 years later, he's in All About Eve with Bette Davis. So there's a lot of that going on. But I mean, these are all like, Cisco and I talk about Harry Dean Stanton a lot and how he's one of those guys that shows up in a movie and like his greatest strength is what he adds to a film. And all of these people are that kind of thing where it's like, they may not be lead material, but this film would not work without, the straight man work of Edward Arnold or Gregory Ratoff or Kent Taylor. And that's a talent in and of itself. You can't have everyone be a comedian. You need people who are like the foundation of the building, essentially, right? Right.
Well, and you also have, you have the studio system functioning at that time, right? So if you have people under contract, you're bringing in people. So we have in this era, people are making sometimes 8 or 9, 10, 12 movies a year, depending on which studio they're working for. And so they are just making movie after movie after movie after movie, which is unheard of now, right? We joke that Pedro Pascal is in every movie right now, but those movies might have been produced many years ago, right? They're just now being released. Whereas you have so I'm looking at Edward Arnold, for example, in 1933, he was in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He was in 10 movies, including Duck Soup. Okay, same year. So they're constantly doing stuff because they are required by their contracts. And when you're not a big star, you got to keep fulfilling your contract so you can get paid, so you can eat, so you can go hustle and do
it's more like a job. It was more like a job back then.
It is a job.
You show up with your lunch and like you check in and then it's like, what am I on today? I don't know. You're an extra in the Battle of Waterloo. Okay, I'll go over there. Right. I just picked up the movie Day of the Locust, which is a great novel and great movie about this period and just all the people, the locusts who swarmed upon LA hoping to make a living. And it's about all these bit players who just, the people, but these guys actually were doing stuff. We're talking about the people who didn't get cast in a lot or get cast in terrible roles and then just kind of disappeared or left LA. And it's an interesting time period. It's a very different ecosystem to have been making movies. And I think there's advantages and disadvantages to that and the way we do things now. But there are things that it would have been so cool to work in a place where you're just there every day making art for a paycheck,
right. So like Ralph Harold, who plays Slick, he between 1920 and 1963 is apparently in 99 films.
That's wild.
So you could just be like, I'm going to go on a Ralph Harold binge and try to watch all of the 99 films. That's insane, right? Also, he's incredibly good looking, not necessarily as Slick, but in a lot of different roles. It's wild. The stuff that they're churning out, and this is why there were part of why they created the Academy Awards and also bringing on the production code is because they're dealing with, in Hollywood, dealing with labor strikes because people were being worked to the bone. They didn't have a lot of rights as actors and directors, and they're, again, making so many movies all at the same time, and they're running themselves ragged. And then you have stars who could be maybe a little bit more selective about what they're doing at the time. But yeah.
And even then they just get a lot of them, would get shoved into other projects just because they were on contract. Mae West was rare, I think, in that like Mae West very much was somebody who came in with a good contract to kind of like do what she wanted to do for a while. Mm-hmm. And where does her career go after the Hays Code comes into play? Like, where does Mae West end up?
In pop culture, first of all, 33, 34, she's popping up a lot of places.
Oh, yeah.
Cole Porter, the Anything Goes musical, main song, You're the Moon Over Mae West's Shoulder. One of my favorite Frida Kahlo paintings. If you don't know, my master's was in art history and restoration. So one of my favorite paintings, my dress hangs there. They're off to the left side of that. There's a little portrait of Mae West because supposedly Frida Kahlo's husband, Diego Rivera, Mae West was his favorite actress. We have that
tracks.
Up. Yes. Yeah.
There's also Salvador Dali. There's also Salvador Dali's face of Mae West from 1935.
Yep.
Yeah, she was the original. She's the original Material Girl. For those who don't remember the 80s,
she is.
Madonna before she became kind of Madge, like in the 80s, she was the Material Girl, and it was based off of a mix of influences, not just the obvious Marilyn Monroe and Jean Harlow, but also Mae West is definitely in that bucket of people she was pulling from.
And she does get a lot of that comparison of like she was the Marilyn Monroe of her time, which like a lot of people want, and I would be included in wanting to push back on that. But I think it's just the quick meteoric rise, but also different reasons, but the short length, I think, of the career as well, because really she, by mid to late 30s, she's being labeled box office poison. Her next, again, she's late 30s, she's refusing that role in Gone with the Wind. After I'm No Angel, we have, again, we talked about Klondike Annie in 36. Again, cities are banning advertising of the film. It's not doing super well. She switches from Paramount to work with Universal on My Little Chickadee in 1940. But that film in particular was being publicly condemned by religious leaders, particularly being called out by the Catholic Church for what they felt was a breach of the Hays Code that wasn't being enforced.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Just because of the shtick between W.C. Fields and her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Kind of the final film she did for this period, The Heat's On, in 43. And this would be the first film she was not allowed to rewrite or work on her own dialogue. And the film was a commercial flop.
I've never seen it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not great. It's very bland.
It's like the Marx Brothers had Love Happy, which I have yet to see, and it's supposed to be terrible. So
it is. Yeah. And it's, and I'm sure Sarah can add extra details and stuff to this too. She's from there. She does transition to like radio, thinking she can evade some of the censorship. Because again, we have like FCC oversight, not as tight of censorship. So she's doing like sketch shows, comedy shows. However, the FCC, when she transitioned, got involved. And she had several broadcast or recordings that were never broadcast due to vulgarity.
All right.
And post this era, for the rest of her career, she's appearing on like variety shows and sketch shows on television. She's performing at awards shows. She does have her hand at like a fairly, I would argue, successful like recording career, but does not really see a resurgence in film.
Yeah, and she even her recording career starts in the 30s. I mean, she's singing
Broadway,
in Broadway, but then in the movies that she's in, she's recording all kinds of stuff for the movies that she's in. We talked a little bit, Dad and I did, about her recording stuff in our episode on She Done Him Wrong. Then she goes on and like performs here in Las Vegas and stuff like that. So her career never quite fully dies out. She essentially is performing almost up into her deathbed, essentially, and is still incredibly popular as an iconic figure, but doesn't have, essentially the code kills her film career because she can't do the stuff that made her famous, and she's almost cobbled or castrated almost in terms of what she is able to do on film. And it's tragic in a way that she's not able to continue on with what she should be doing, in the same way that her Broadway career was kind of stopped because of concerns with censorship and all of those things. And I'm trying to think, how many times was she married? I feel like she was married one time legally.
To a gangster.
And they were married for about 30 years. So and then she had one long-term partner. So for all of her portrayal of being a man-eater on film, on paper, she's pretty faithful. That doesn't mean that she doesn't have a whole lot of lovers in her real life, but she kind of can get away with whatever she wants, more or less, in her personal life. So
can we also do a shout out that she was like weird denying that they were married? So she was married to Frank. I can't pronounce his last name. Zatskis, maybe. But he was a vaudevillian actor, but then turned gangster.
Didn't he go? His stage name was Wallace, right? Frank Wallace.
Wallace. Yep. And they were supposedly married in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. They were here at the time. It was reported that they were here and got married, but she would deny that they were married. But supposedly they were, and it was in court records and things. So,
shoot, I want to find out where they got married. Probably City Hall, right? I mean,
it would be it was in 1911 that they got married.
Yeah, so she was really young when she got married.
Like a lot of the thought was she downplayed it because of the characters and things she played, right? Of like never be tied down.
Yeah, you got to keep the image alive, which she continues well into her 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Which, if we can talk about her late sort of, I don't know, kind of reemergence, I guess is the best way to explain it. She becomes obviously this big symbol in the gay community. Kind of a gay icon in a lot of ways, even though she wasn't herself. But it's, she did drag in her early career, and her whole persona is basically a drag performance of herself. Like it is kind of a drag performance. And this leads to, as the Hays Code is breaking down, her films start being screened again, along with, the early Lubitsch stuff like Design for Living. We've talked about this. Some of the early Universal horrors. Freaks starts making the college circuit, the Marx Brothers. And a whole new generation in the late 60s, early 70s loves Mae West. And this, of course, leads to a resurgence in interest of like, hey, maybe we could put Mae West in a movie. And where does that lead, Sarah?
Well, she's and the stuff that she's in the 70s, none of it's very good. It's not very good, but it's certainly fascinating to look at, right? Yeah. And it's absolutely fun, and it gets to be this sort of over the top where she's playing kind of herself, but like a caricature of herself. But she's already playing a caricature of herself in the 30s when she's rising to fame. So it's kind of this super meta form that assembles Mae West in the 70s playing. And at that point, she's in her 80s, and nobody questions it, right? 80-year-old. 85-year-old.
The critics do at the time, for sure.
Who cares about the critics?
Well, fuck them,
right?
but I'm
the
just saying,
audiences are.
Yeah, I'm also appalled that we're arguing that the 1978 hit Sextette, starring Timothy Dalton and Tony Curtis, is not amazing.
No,
Wait.
It has Alice Cooper.
Timothy Dalton is a Shakespearean actor. Okay, like, come on, this is top-notch cinema.
Like,
hello.
Milton shows up in this. It's just, oh man, Ringo's star. Like, it's just.
I've started building kind of an affinity for these weird 70s and 60s movies. Some of them are very hard to see, but like the movies where they were just like, I don't know, throw Mae West and Alice Cooper together and see what happens. Like, why not? Why not?
Yeah, and this is like 2 years before her passing. Like, it's
right. But this is also the era that throws David Bowie and Bing Crosby together. So, like, why not? It would make sense to put Mae West in to a film and be like, yep.
Or like, I think of like there's been a reevaluation of some of it too. Like the movie At Long Last Love is sort of this, like, the 70s. We don't talk about this a lot. But the 70s had a resurgence of interest in Art Deco, 1930s aesthetics, but also 1930s films, even though, like, we know musicals collapsed in, like, the mid-60s to early 70s. And you get, like, a smattering of them after that, like the epics, too. You know, you've got the rise and fall of the Roman Empires near the end there. Musical-wise, you've got stuff like Funny Girl coming in. You've got the weird adaptation of Man of La Mancha. And then you have outliers that are popular, like Willy Wonka, which we've discussed before. But then Peter Bogdanovich's At Long Last Love from 1975, starring Burt Reynolds and Sybil Shepherd and Madeline Kahn. Who else is in this thing? But like that film's impossible to see. Karina Longworth just screened it in LA for a crowd, and I wish I could have been there because, like, I want to see this movie. It's not illegally up anywhere and easy to find. You can't buy a DVD of it. You can't stream it for money. Like, it's missing.
And I would pay a couple of dollars to see those films.
Yeah, no, but I mean, most of these I watch on Tubi because I'm just like, you know what? It's free. Let's watch it. And I think there's something really entertaining about the 70s, just like, especially the old directors not knowing what to do with themselves. People like Stanley Donen just being like, I don't know, like, people like nostalgia who like me, so I guess I'll lean into nostalgia, but I'm going to shoot it like it's a new Hollywood movie, even though it takes place in, like, an Art Deco whatever. I don't know. There is something very fascinating about the 70s sort of appeals to nostalgia, like Sextette. And then Myra Breckinridge is a weird mix of that and social commentary. And I don't know what it's saying about transgender stuff.
Don't even go there.
We're going to do an episode about Myra Breckinridge because I feel like that's its own thing. Anyway, but yeah, no, it is cool that Mae West was able to be around for her, like, reappreciation, that she got to shine a few more times in films, even if they weren't the greatest vehicles. I do recommend watching the YouTube clip of her and Alice Cooper because it'll hurt your brain. I feel like it rewired my brain chemistry in a negative way somehow. I recommend trying that out. You know, it's like
blasphemy.
I had fun, but it was just seeing Alice Cooper with a nice little tight haircut playing vocal jazz tunes. It was a weird thing to see.
And then he, like, replays that same character in Wayne's World 20, 30 years later.
Yep. I mean, if I'm being honest, the most morally offensive thing about this whole episode might be talking about Sextette, but just the fact that
I disagree firmly, but
well, we're gonna have to do an episode on Sextette if it is morally offensive, and then we'll decide what we think of it. And on that note, I think it's time to figure out why the Catholics thought this movie was morally offensive. I feel like we've covered all those bases at this point, but we'll be right back. And we're back. What did the Catholics think of this movie? It's not easy to unearth things from this time period. But fortunately, I did find some stuff. I have a scanned article from the New York Times. I also have some actual Catholic news articles that I'm going, or one news article, singular, because again, not easy. Something to know as I've been digging through these and I'm starting to learn more and more about like the Catholic press and the evolution of it is initially the Legion of Decency and the Catholic press weren't really, film criticism and film theory were still in development. So the Catholics weren't interested in that early on. So first up, I have a article from the Catholic Transcript, volume number Roman numerals I don't want to read right now, number 5, July 1934. The headline is Movies Recalled to Undergo Renovations. This is actually about the movie It Ain't No Sin, which would become Belle of the 90s, but this is from the same year this movie was released, but I think it gives good context in terms of what the Catholics thought of Mae West at this point and where things were at with her. I could not find anything on I'm No Angel from the Catholic press. Again, because they weren't really interested in film theory at this time. Film criticism in Catholic circles would start evolving over time. And eventually the name change from the Legion of Decency happened partially because they were becoming more and more interested in evaluating films for their artistic merit. But here we go. Hollywood, July. The latest motion picture offering featuring Mae West will undergo some renovations following its rejection by the New York Board of Regents. It has been announced at the Paramount Studios here. Some scenes in the picture will be retaken, some of the dialogue will be rewritten, and the title of the film may also be changed, it was said. I also have an article from the July 7th, 1934 issue of the New York Times. Headline reads, Films Classified in Catholic List. Chicago Archdiocese grades movies for guidance of Legion of Decency. Some termed, quote, suitable. But smaller groups are found offensive in spots or immoral and indecent. Chicago, July 7th. Recent motion pictures were classified as immoral and indecent, offensive in spots, and suitable in a checklist issued today to the Chicago Catholics by a board of censors created to furnish necessary information to those signing the movie pledge of the Legion of Decency. The checklist, issued for the Chicago Archdiocese as part of the church's campaign against salacious films, approved 52 pictures as suitable, called 41 offensive in spots, and termed 31 others immoral and indecent. The titles which the board considered suitable were, and then it's just a list of the suitable films for just average people, offensive in spots, and then the ones that were immoral and indecent. And, it doesn't really take a genius to learn that Mae West was indecent. So again, it's harder to find a lot of material with these older films, especially when it comes to Catholic newsletters or newspapers. I don't think any of us are that surprised that the Catholics of that time had an issue with I'm No Angel, right? Catholic sexual morality especially, but even just the church's attitude about women in this time. We're only a few years out from, famously an encyclical that says women shouldn't vote or have jobs and that it would lead to the downfall of society if women were to independently make their own money or vote. Encyclicals gradually build on the greater doctrine of the Catholic Church. So I don't think any of us three are surprised by this at all.
Not at all, especially considering the censorship that it went through up front, right? So there were already concerns that Hayes was bringing up when they were making the film of you need to delete all of our favorite lines were supposed to be deleted before it was ever released, and somehow they got it through. And one of the big issues that came across with the censorship when it was being made or in post-production essentially was a lot of the songs that she's singing. And so you have to change the titles of the songs because the titles of the songs are too suggestive. So right off the bat, Hayes and Breen are taking exception with these things that are almost throwaway components that we would see in terms of the bigger storytelling, but are so offensive up front that they have to change stuff. The song that she plays on the records, right, that she goes through looking for the city that the guy is from so that she can play him a record. Yep. Right. And also it's her singing on the records as well. So No One Loves Me Like that Dallas Man. They original title was No One Does It Like That Dallas Man, so they had to fundamentally change lyrics.
Oh my goodness.
as well as the song that she sings to Cary Grant when they're playing the piano. She says, I want you, I need you. That's the new title of the song. But the original title and the original lyrics were Take Me, which is far too suggestive. Yeah. Yeah, it's wild. So, and then of course, all of these things are continued to be censored out when they're doing re-releases and stuff like that. So Breen, and Hayes are just kind of going ham on this film before it even makes it into theaters, and then continue to pick away at it. They did say, let's see here. That No One Does It Like a Dallas Man, the words that need to be changed. So does it needs to be changed to loves me, and specific lines of the song, such as with a special whip and he can ride, were so offensive, as was the entire fourth stanza of the song, They Call Me Sister Honky Tonk. Okay, the line, baby, I can arm you with this love of mine in the song, I'm no angel, was deemed overly suggestive, as was the line, it takes a good man to make me in the song Going to Town. So
Going to Town.
Going to Town. Okay. Wow. I mean, it is what it is. And so, but she has those issues in She Done Him Wrong in the previous year. And so, it's no WAP, but these songs were so offensive at the time that you couldn't even put them out there. Right. They're just, so everything in this movie is offensive, according to, former Postmaster General.
Not according to us or me. That's why we're doing it.
Yep.
No, and speaking of, I love this movie. Do both of you give this your imprimatur, your seal of approval?
100%.
Yes.
Awesome.
Of course.
Yeah, this movie rules. I love this movie. I rewatch this. It's a comfort film that I like putting it on like a rainy day. It's just such a funny ass movie. I love it's like hard because like none of the other films quite match this. I feel like She Done Him Wrong, I feel like does. I don't know if you agree with me, but I feel like that one's really on the same level. But Belle of the 90s, you start to see again, like the fall off starts. It's still really good. But by the time you're hitting the later films, it's just not the same. Right.
Well, and this one, this is the film that she had the most control over the script. Right. She gets singular writing credit for the screenplay. She Done Him Wrong, it's based on her own play, but again, they had to censor so much stuff. They couldn't even use the original Broadway play title because having any connection to her Broadway play was you can't do it, right? And so they had to agree that in all of their promotional materials they couldn't make any reference that it was related to the Broadway play, so on and so forth. She Done Him Wrong is really short. It's like 60 plus, just over an hour long. So it's
like 68, I think, 68 minutes.
Yeah, something like that. But it's super chaotic because you can tell that they've had to cut so much stuff out. The beginning of this film has some of that same chaotic energy, but once she's kind of left to her own devices to write out the story of what is happening with this romance, everything is fine. And so her own fingerprints on it make it a better film because somehow, despite all of the censorship, she's able to tell a cohesive story, whereas they were cutting apart. She Done Him Wrong is essentially a Frankenstein of what she had originally intended, right? So you have The Attempt, which is pretty good, nominated for Best Picture, and then this one, which is, I think, objectively a better movie, a little bit longer, but doesn't receive the same sort of accolades in terms of recognition and its place in cinema history, for example, but a better movie than her previous one.
Yeah, I think this movie is great. It gets my seal of approval. I'm glad both of you feel the same way.
You wouldn't have us on to be like, it sucks.
Oh, I might. You'd be surprised.
But not when it's Mae West.
No, not Mae West. Freddie got fingered? Absolutely.
Yes.
Not Mae West.
Not Mae West.
So, Sarah, let me ask you, where can people find you, your podcast, what you're up to?
Yeah, so Shea Cinema, we are on all streaming platforms. You can find me on Instagram. That's mostly the socials that I hang out on. I'm not very good at the social media because I'm an old and I can't spend 100% of my time doing. I spend a lot of time on Instagram chatting with you, Bill. Sometimes I'm on Threads. We definitely have new episodes that we need to release. Our next episode that's going to come out, and I've literally had it in the can since last November. It's going to be on King Kong. It's a bonus episode.
That's exciting. Yes.
So exciting. And then, of course, we're going to continue through the rest of 1933. So we've got all of that going on. I've appeared on a lot of other podcasts. The Greatest Movie of All Time podcast I've done a lot of stuff on. I've recorded a couple of episodes for a new podcast that's going to come out next year where I talked about Freaks as well as Psycho. Super, super fun. Got lots of stuff in the pipeline. So we've been on a hiatus, but we're trying to get back into it. And my dad keeps bothering me, like, when are we going to do our next one? When are we going to do our next one? Actually, the next episode we need to record is Gold Diggers of 1933, which is a delightful pre-code musical where you might actually see some naked people dancing on stage. So yeah, love it.
You love to see it.
I do love to see it. It's one of my faves.
Great. And also, I just want to remind people that our merch store is up and live at www.morallyoffensive.com. It is still, well, it's not Hot Priest Summer anymore, but we still have Hot Priest Summer shirts. We also have shirts for the actual podcast, hats, tote bags, swimsuits, although you probably won't need one until next year. But we've got jackets, all sorts of things. And that money goes directly to us just to keep the posting fees paid for, to keep the lights on, to pay, honestly, for the hosting for the merch site, which is ironic, and to slide cat food under the door to pay the editor, who I guess is me now. So now I'm eating cat food. Awesome. I love that.
When are we getting, don't you remember you were going to make a t-shirt that was like Enemy of the Pod?
Yes, I
T-shirts?
keep pushing it back because it's going to require illustration time, and I need to I got to be in the zone for that one. But okay, I do plan on making it.
Still waiting for that one.
it's priority now that Hot Priest Summer is behind us. But that was kind of like an unexpected, okay, we need to make these and get these out on time. Yeah. Whereas like Joseph Breen, I was like, he can be more of a fall guy. You know, he's right. He's kind of a, fall.
He's a long-term fall guy.
he is literally evergreen. That shirt will last. It's not seasonal. He's evergreen. So yeah, no, I plan on making that shirt for sure.
Okay, good, because I want one.
Jess, do you want people to find you, or has that changed at all, or do you just want people to leave you alone?
I prefer to exist in the dark corners, so no.
All right, we'll throw you back in the coffin after this, and I'll wake you up for the next one.
Yes, please. Wake me up in another 10 years.
Very good. Sarah, thank you again for joining us. This has been awesome. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a delight. Been waiting for it for so long, and the vibes are so good. Yeah. I'm super excited for your new content to come out. I'm a horror girly. My dissertation was horror. Really looking forward to what you've got coming out. So excellent. Thank you. I'm very excited about it as well. I just gotta, find time when I'm not in the beginning of the school year, which I am right now. So been there. I feel for you. Yeah, I know so many people in that position right now. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Morally Offensive. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Really, reviews and ratings on your favorite app help us more than anything you could possibly do, because it gets attention, it gets eyeballs on the podcast. So if you want to help us, if you want us to put up more content, that's like one of the biggest things you can do, and it's free 99 to do it. Please just leave a review, some nice comments, add some stars. It just helps us get out there, and more people, and gradually more people are finding us, which is super cool. The guests we're lining up for the next few months are actually starting to be kind of insane. A few people who I really respected and looked and loved their stuff before I even
started this podcast. So it's going to be kind of a wild few months, actually, especially starting with our special announcement for November, which I've not made public yet. So stay tuned. Please rate, review, and subscribe. Help us get the word out. Share this thing. Share it with your friends. Share it with your brother and sister. Share it with your Catholic mother and see how the holidays go. Always a fun time.
Share it with your enemies.
Yeah, why not? What? Honestly, share the Freddy Got Fingered episode with your enemies where I talk about, Daddy, would you like some sausage and jacking off a horse? It'll go over great. Please join us again in 2 weeks when I am joined by an old friend and fellow Columbia alum to discuss a film about divorce and the horrors of parenthood through the lens of body horror master David Cronenberg. We are, of course, discussing The Brood. Thanks for listening, and as always, go and sin no more. Today we are continuing Hot Pre-Summer with a film about the most infamous exorcist of all time. I didn't rewrite this. Wow.